Yes. Let's go. Yes. Yes. What the? No, I didn't press that. What the?
There was no other way.
Crap. Controllers and keyboards. They've taken the blame for you losing since the gaming industry began. There's been a lot of changes in game control since the very inception of gaming, which is unsurprising if you take a look at the massive difference in controllers since the very first consoles came to the market. I distinctly remember playing games like Pokemon and Super Mario Bros. Without a joystick for perfectly fine-tuned movement. Instead, you had to become a master at soft-touching a button, or else this would happen. Meanwhile, keyboard and mouse went through their own little evolution. I remember playing Doom, where the keyboard was used for both the movement, looking around, and shooting. Mice simply weren't good enough back then to get those sick flicks like you see in CSGO nowadays. Luckily, that's improved a lot over time, with mouse technology growing, and of course as people became more and more adept at using a mouse and keyboard combo. Although some real-time strategy players definitely would like to disagree. Meanwhile, back over at controllers, a different kind of evolution was happening. While having been used in arcades and some early consoles, around 1997 with the release of the N64 and the second variant of the PS1 controller, joysticks really started becoming the main way of controlling your character. Which makes absolute sense, because in the original 2D landscape, being limited to just up, down, left, and right directions just fit. But in the, at the time, upcoming 3D landscape, you needed to also be able to go diagonally. But even then, it wasn't always perfect. I mean, who the heck designed the N64 controller and thought that it was a good idea? How the heck do you hold this thing? On the left? On the right? In the middle? But controllers kept on evolving, and now we're at a point where all of them are mostly the same. 2 joysticks, an up, down, left, right D-pad for triggers, A, B, I, X, or X, circle, triangle, square buttons, throw in the menu and options buttons, and you're golden. Heck, we even have distinct vibrations based on the surface you're walking on, as well as customized trigger points depending on the gun you're shooting with. You'd imagine all game controls to now be equally good, right? Well, ask any of these people, and they'll probably tell you no. Because each game has its own control scheme, and oftentimes it's even different for the same game across multiple different controllers, consoles, and all of that. Take Rocket League. I initially started playing this on a Switch controller through Steam. I then tried playing it on a PS5, which meant I obviously had to rebind certain buttons. But strangely enough, that needed to be done on my Switch too, even though I was using the same Pro controller. On top of that, each game has its own unique challenges that it has to overcome with its controls, and over the years they were solved in different ways. Even now, there are quite big differences between games in how it feels to control your character, which can be based on a variety of factors. Let's compare 2 easy examples. The idea of playing a cowboy in the Wild West is incredibly appealing to me. Exploring a beautiful open world, shooting with revolvers, and experiencing this chaotic time in history is an insanely cool idea. Sadly, I hate the controls of RDR2. They feel so clunky. Each time I do something, it feels like there's a huge delay on every action. This might seem more realistic, but it actually just worsens the experience for me. Meanwhile, decapitating monsters in The Witcher 3 feels buttery smooth. When I spoke to a friend about this, I was actually surprised to find out that he felt the complete opposite. I believe that the reason for this is that we both got used to the way one game feels and is controlled. So people playing RDR2 first will feel that The Witcher 3 feels horrible, and those that played The Witcher 3 first will feel that RDR2 feels clunky. There's different delays and movements on each action you do in both games, which just massively impacts the feeling of the controls, which for some, like my fiance and I, made playing RDR2 just a horrible experience. But then there's also some games that take full advantage of their wacky control schemes and interactions. Jusant, for example, makes full use of the triggers to make climbing feel super realistic and difficult, but a ton of fun. QWOP is a classic where every button controls a different limb and you attempt to run a race without, well, turning up into a pretzel. And then there's Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, where if you're not playing co-op, you control both characters with the same controller, with each half being used for the other one? What? There's also quite a few games that don't take full advantage of their controls. For a lot of people, the controls of Shadow of the Colossus made an otherwise amazing game a lot less amazing, with, for example, the character not directly controlling the horse, but instead the reins. The Last Guardian often tripped me up, and I definitely died a handful of times thanks to wrong button presses or just general delays in movement. Superman 64 seems to be the #1 on the list of the most hated control schemes for the internet. And then Zelda Skyward Sword, for some reason, made you need to hold a shoulder button in order to actually look around with the control stick. Just because they decided that for some reason sword strikes needed to also be assigned to the same control stick. Controls are this incredibly interesting part of games and game design, and change how the game is experienced on a fundamental level. Sometimes for the good, while other times maybe for the bad. I always hear most people talk about how games are unique through their art style and music and story, but maybe controls have a bigger impact than most people expect, and could be the key to your best or your worst gaming experience. Because come on, don't lie to me. You've blamed your loss to a boss fight on the controls at least once, right? I'd love to hear all about the games that you played that had wacky, buttery smooth, or even horrible controls in the comments down below. I, for example, never even got to talk about the mouse-based combat controls used in The Witcher 1, which I actually really loved. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it and want to watch some others, here's one about how difficulty in games sucks, and another about how fake indie games stole the Game Awards. Outside of that, thank you again so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers!